So we developed LUMNA to treat nervous system related issues, right? To help people with their nervous system related health, because, this was leading those things. Stress is an underlying factor for nervous system dysregulation, and that causes a lot of issues with anxiety and depression, which is a major issue today, and chronic pain, something that we've all experienced. I would love to know, what you think are the most powerful ingredients in LUMNA and why. Because when we were going through this, there were so many ingredients for us to choose from, and every single ingredient is so juicy, which we will talk about all of those in another question. But just on a highlight level, I'm curious to hear what you think are the most powerful and why.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's really hard for me to even narrow down the list because, like I've said before, literally every ingredient in the formulation is intentional. Like there is a reason that it's put in there, and most of them are for the medicinal or therapeutic value, not just because it smells good. Like even if it does smell good, it's doing way more than just smelling good. Smelling good is kind of like a byproduct. Like, great, it smells good, perfect, but that's not why I put it in. I was intentional about that. I want to make sure it did smell good for most people, at least. But there's really, or something that can be used as an antioxidant, but also has a high degree of evidence for skin health. We're applying it to the skin. So literally every ingredient, or something that emulsifies, that also improves your cell membranes of all your nerves, your neurons. So like it was literally intentional down to the ingredient. There's nothing in there that I wouldn't consider medicinal. That said, even narrowing down the list of the heavy hitters is long, but I'm going to try to get through them. So I'm going to focus first on the overlap in formulations. So things that are in both products. And I'm going to just speak in broad strokes about why it's good for, but focusing on, of course, the nervous system, but also anxiety, depression, stress, as well as pain. And then I'll go more into the specifics with each formulation. So in both formulations, one of the oils that we use is castor oil. And castor oil is definitely an Ayurvedic oil that's been used for millennia in Ayurvedic medicine out of India for probably at least 10,000 years. First of all, it's anti-inflammatory and it helps with pain. So like even just applying plain old castor oil, let's say if uterine cramps, it helps with pain and it's anti-inflammatory. But also something that the West doesn't know about is that it's very anti-anxiety because it's very heavy and sticky and kind of weighs. Now this is pure castor oil. We made sure not to have that much in the formulation that you feel that sticky quality, but it weighs down the nerves and it really feeds the nerves and kind of, and both cools them off, but heats them up in a very unique way. So just a plain old oil that's actually dramatically overlooked. It's also great for your liver, but that's a separate thing. So that's in both formulations. Something else that's in both formulations is an herb called Mucuna pruriens, or kapikachu in Ayurveda. It's an Ayurvedic herb that's made its way very robustly into Western medicine because it actually has dopamine effects. It increases dopamine. And so it's been used in a lot of clinical trials for both depression and Parkinson's, actually, because it has L-DOPA, which upregulates dopamine. So it's really good for nerve health. That's how it's traditionally used in Ayurvedic medicine. It's a nervous system tonic, an adaptogen of the nervous system, as well as for reproductive health, especially for men, actually. So it's used for women too, but it's actually considered what we call a vajikarana or an aphrodisiac herb because it increases also something called ojas, which is like our immune system and our hormone system. So in Ayurveda, there's a lot more to it than just this has L-DOPA and it's good for depression and Parkinson's. But it's a heavy hitter. It's a really great herb. Then in both formulations is ashwagandha, which is probably one of the most, if not the most famous Ayurvedic herb. And it's used mostly in the West for stress, chronic stress, because it's an adaptogen, like we've talked about extensively. But what's interesting about it being an adaptogen is that it really helps regulate cortisol and therefore the hormones, metabolic hormones, including adrenal hormones, which is cortisol, thyroid. There's a lot of evidence for it for improving thyroid function. And then sex hormones. Again, ashwagandha actually primarily targets male sex hormones. It's a phytoandrogen, so it helps with male reproductive hormones and building testosterone, for example. But in low doses, it also helps with female reproductive integrity. And then for all, it's one of the, in Ayurvedic medicine, it's one of the number one nerve tonics or nerve health tonics, and really great for anxiety in Ayurveda. It's the go-to. Now, for our for one of our formulations for I Am Resilient, I balance the ashwagandha with shatavari, which is kind of like the female counterpart or consort to ashwagandha. So shatavari definitely has more of a phytoestrogen effect and helps to build female reproductive health in a big way. But again, it does that primarily by reducing stress hormones. So when you reduce stress hormones for women, their sex hormones are more magnified in a helpful way. So they're both there to kind of balance each other out, the masculine and the feminine. And they, like I said, shatavari has less of a nerve impact. Ashwagandha has more of a nerve impact, but too much of it isn't always good for women. They're there to balance each other out, and super safe in that way, and can be used super long-term in Ayurveda, like lifelong, and for people's health. Another Ayurvedic herb we used is Gotu kola or Centella asiatica. It's one of Ayurveda, and this one has also been co-opted by Western medicine in a big way. But it's one of the number one herbs for brain health and for mental clarity and focus. But what's interesting is it's not stimulating. It's not like ginseng or something else that can help people focus, but it kind of ramps them up. Gotu kola is very balancing and calming, but it also helps, we call that a nootropic, or something that increases cognition. Something else I love about Gotu kola and why it's in both is that it's really great for skin health. It's being used extensively now in dermatology formulations because it helps to repair collagen and connective tissue. It's great for any sort of connective tissue disorder. I work with a lot of those clinically, and it's one of my go-tos. So it's supporting the skin and all of the connective tissue, especially when it comes to things like pain, tendons, ligaments, muscles, etc. But you also have this very clear brain and heart sort of opening aspect. Something else that's used, this is a Western herb that's used in both products, is kava or kava. Piper methysticum is the Latin name, and it's definitely a heavy hitter for anxiety, but a lot less sedating than something like valerian or some of the other heavy, like California poppy. Those are more sedating, but it definitely helps with anxiety and nerve health in general. And then something that was part of my training that people never think about for kava is that it's a muscle relaxer, and it has a particular affinity for the pelvis. So any sort of painful pelvic conditions, which of course enormous amounts of women have painful pelvic conditions of all sorts, it relaxes that pelvic floor and relaxes the spasms. But I've used it as a muscle relaxer for people with spinal cord injuries or cerebral palsy. I mean, any sort of muscle spasms, it works tremendously for. So that's why it helps with the pain, but also calming action. Another
PMS, a lot of people.
What's that? MS?
PMS is good for PMS.
PMS, yeah, absolutely. Really helps to just calm people, chill people out. Now, another one that is a traditional Ayurvedic herb that's been co-opted again in a big way in Western medicine, as well as other branches of medicine, is saffron. So saffron traditionally has been used for nerve health and gut health in Ayurveda majorly. But what's really interesting is there's a ton of new clinical evidence coming out on it for depression and for cognition, like actually like human trials for ADHD, kids with ADHD, and using it as an alternative to stimulants. So it really helps with focus and clarity, depression. Another big area of research for it is satiety signals. So helping people feel full when they're actually full. And so there's some degree of evidence that it helps with weight loss by regulating the neurotransmitters and hormones that are causing somebody to be excessively hungry, like leptin resistance or dysregulation in dopamine and self-control, et cetera. So it kind of works on all of that, but and it also smells great and is incredible for the skin. But really it's more of an uplifting herb, again, without being stimulating, and really good for nerve health overall, and for also detoxing the nerves. Cacao is obviously a South American herb that has been co-opted into Western herbalism. And clearly, I think most people know it helps with depression. It has serotonergic properties, meaning it increases serotonin, so it helps with depression, focus and clarity. It does have some very mildly stimulating effects to help the brain focus, and just general overall nerve health because of the serotonin effects. And it makes people feel subjectively good. And it smells good. But there's actually a lot going on with cacao in terms of its phytochemical profile, and it's one of my favorites. So that's in both as well. Another spice, not the cacao is a spice, but saffron is, that we use, that is used extensively in Ayurvedic medicine, but really hasn't made its way into Western herbalism or medicine, is nutmeg. Nutmeg is one of the heaviest sedatives found in nature. So we're just using a tiny little bit for the smell. It helps increase digestion as well, including digestion at the mental level. In Ayurveda, we think of digestion as a mental process as well as a physical process. So it's very calming for anxiety and being ramped up. It also decreases blood pressure if somebody has high blood pressure, and again, supports the nerves and the digestive capacity, which is really important. Only a few more that are in both. So CBG, cannabigerol, that is in both formulations. It is a cannabinoid. It's non-psychoactive, so it's hemp derived. It does not cause people to feel high. It's the mother cannabinoid. So it's the first cannabinoid that the cannabis and the hemp plant both make before it differentiates into both THC in one lineage and CBD in the other lineage. So it's one of the simplest cannabinoids as well. And it helps with a ton of things. So it's great for the immune system. It's anti-inflammatory, a little bit less so than CBD, which we'll get to, but it's still great for the immune system, anti-cancer, a lot more uplifting than CBD, which is definitely more sedating. So it really helps with depression. I always say CBG for giggles because it makes you feel really good. Nerve health, it's neuroprotective, it's neuroplastogenic, incredibly helpful for the nervous system, recovery from traumatic brain injuries, things like that. And then gut health. I also always say CBG for giggles and gut, because it really helps digestive function when taking it orally, but also systemically through the way that we're doing it. So definitely less sedating than CBD, but super uplifting, non-habit forming. I could go on and on and on. It's one of my favorite phytoconstituents. Then we get,
just to interject quickly, and we'll talk more at the end about this. Everything is super carefully sourced. We're going to talk more about that. That's a very important thing for us. Everything is organic. And the CBG in particular has 0% THC.
Exactly. Yeah. And tested to be confirmed each and every batch, 0% THC. So non-habit forming, non-addictive, non-psychoactive traditionally in that way. So then a non-herbal component is magnesium, which is obviously a mineral. And so why magnesium? Well, a lot of reasons. One is that our soil has been dramatically depleted of magnesium. So most people, if they're not supplementing, unfortunately, are deficient in magnesium. And magnesium is really important for calming the nervous system and the nerves, and for being a muscle relaxer as well, because it vasodilates, it relaxes muscles, it calms things, just through the way it works on the nervous system primarily. And so again, most people are deficient. So most people have to supplement, but this is highly bioavailable. So it's driven into the tissues, definitely supports nerve health. And again, acts as a muscle relaxer, not only to just have the somatic relaxation, when you're feeling really stressed and clenched up, but also for pain. If there's a pain component, it'll relax those muscles. Two more ingredients that are in both formulations that are clinically relevant. One is helichrysum essential oil, which not a lot of people know about, but it's one of the most precious and expensive essential oils. But the reason I use it in both is that it's very useful for depression and for, again, when somebody's feeling really low, it's uplifting. It kind of helps to bring the energy up. But it's also very useful for muscle pain in particular. Applying it topically to your muscles, it relaxes the muscles. It's also an incredible wound healer, just phenomenal for the skin. So that's another reason I added it, because it's like totally a beauty herb in that way. And also any essential oil will drive the ingredients deeper into the tissues. So there's always that benefit of having a driver, an essential oil driver. So that's in both in varying ratios.
And it smells amazing. People are obsessed with how it smells.
Yes, it smells amazing. It comes from the Mediterranean. It's a great essential oil and a great herb in general, and also dramatically underutilized, probably because of cost, but we didn't want to skimp on the quality for cost. So it's there and it really helps. Last thing that's in both products that's, I would say, very clinically relevant and a heavy hitter is something called DMSO, which comes from pine plants. And it's just there to drive the ingredients deeper into the tissues and allow the nutrients and all of the things in the formula to be absorbed through the bloodstream. It also on its own is very helpful for pain. So there are clinical trials of it being used for painful conditions like interstitial cystitis, rheumatoid arthritis, other sorts of autoimmune arthritis, types of arthritis. So it is very helpful for pain, as well as, again, driving the ingredients deeper so that you can increase your blood level of these things. So then moving on, there are two ingredients that I haven't already named. There are other ingredients, but they're more about balancing the formula. So clinically relevant ingredients here for I Am Resilient, which is what we use for both for stress, anxiety, depression, mental balance, kind of reducing the effects of anxiety. One of them is L-theanine. L-theanine comes from tea, especially green tea. It definitely has a lot of research for calming anxiety, but again, very interesting in that it increases focus. It's a nootropic, meaning it increases cognition and mental processing. Without being stimulating. It's calming. It's safe for kids even. And it's also really good for nerve health. In general, it helps with nerves, but also the brain, which is kind of like a giant bundle of nerves. And then one other ingredient that I use also as a driver and essential oil for I Am Resilient is geranium rose. And a lot of people think it's rose, but it's not. It's geranium rose. And that's one of the best essential oils used for anxiety and for stress, because again, and depression, it's uplifting, it helps you feel better, but it's also calming. And it also, something I wanted to be cognizant of, I love lavender. I love people taking enteric-coated lavender oil for anxiety. It works great. But a lot of people don't like the smell of lavender, or if they did, and they've smelled it too much, they can start to have an aversion. And I didn't want anybody to be deterred by a super familiar smell that they might have bad associations with. So geranium rose is a beautiful, really amazing smell that balances out that whole formula. Then I'm just gonna close this door. Hold on. So loud. So then when I retooled the original formulation more for pain based on feedback from patients and others. And that formulation is called Sweet Relief. And so there are a few different things that I added. There are some things I took away, but there are also some things I added in order to make it more applicable for pain, particularly neuropathic pain, but it works for all kinds of pain. And one of those, so the first heavy hitter here is lion's mane mushroom. So this actually has a huge amount of evidence for a whole bunch of things, but one of them is depression and clarity and focus. It's definitely a nootropic that helps with increasing cognition. It's actually, there's a lot of evidence for it for preventing and addressing dementia in folks with things like Alzheimer's disease. And again, that's also because it's neuroplastogenic. So lion's mane has a ton of evidence. It increases a molecule called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the main messenger molecule they have found induces repair of neurons and increases neuronal connections. So this is really to heal nerves that are damaged in the periphery and of course the brain, in order to help those nerves heal and then reduce pain overall. But again, it also has these unique cognitive benefits. It also is great for immune health and for balancing the immune system. So if that's an issue, it's there. For the sweet relief, we did end up using, again, THC-free tested hemp-derived CBD. CBD is definitely more anti-inflammatory and in some ways even immunosuppressive for things like autoimmune conditions, and also really helpful for inflammatory type pain. So that's why we used it in Sweet Relief versus using it in I Am Resilient, is mainly for that anti-inflammatory and analgesic effect. But it is, of course, very helpful for anxiety. Now, there's a lot of people who use it for anxiety, a ton of research on this, but it is more sedative, which is why I didn't want that in I Am Resilient, because I wanted people to ideally be able to use that during the day, even if it's in lower doses, so that they didn't feel super sleepy. And at the level where the CBD is, and with just localized application only of Sweet Relief, it should not have that sedative effect. But it will help with the pain and the inflammation. Again, it's also great for nerve health. Both CBD and CBG are amazing for gut health, based on your cannabinoid receptors in your gut. And both CBD and CBG are neuroplastogens as well. They increase that neuronal connectivity and help to repair neurons. Great for traumatic brain injuries, things like that. Almost through the list here, a couple of very targeted things I added for Sweet Relief is one is called alpha lipoic acid, which is an actual nerve detoxifier. It does this by increasing intracellular glutathione, which is your body's main or only intracellular antioxidant. So it actually detoxes your neurons. So let's say somebody's had heavy metal poisoning and it's poisoned their nerves, mercury, something like that. It will actually detox those nerves. Or high blood sugar, that's another thing that can poison nerves. It actually detoxes those and helps to repair them. So it protects nerves and regenerates nerves. And it's a great antioxidant. Acetyl L-carnitine is something that's used orally a lot for neuropathy and for neuropathic pain. This works more on the metabolism, so it improves cellular metabolism of those nerves. It also increases fat burning in the mitochondria, and again, protects nerves and regenerates them. And that's where the relief, more of the long-term relief comes from. And then the last two ingredients that are in Sweet Relief that are not in I Am Resilient is cayenne. Cayenne can actually even be used pharmaceutical these days because it works for pain. So that's the hot and icy hot. But the mechanism is that it inhibits nociceptive or pain signal from your peripheral neurons, called substance P. So it depletes substance P, which means there's not enough of it there to send a pain signal back to the brain. So that's how it works there. I kept it relatively mild because I didn't want people to be burning themselves. It does increase circulation. And so that's also going to increase absorption through the skin, and have a warming sensation, but I didn't want it to be so hot that it hurts, which a lot of these kind of icy hots can be. But you can definitely still feel it and smell it. And then menthol crystals as well. So that's the icy and the icy hot. Also improves circulation to improve absorption, but it's obviously cooling. And then menthol also has a ton of evidence, as most people know, for being directly analgesic. It reduces pain locally. That's why it's in tons of bath salts and icy hot, etc. So you have this kind of subtle icy hot aspect to the Sweet Relief that you don't have with the I Am Resilient, and the smell is definitely different as well. And so it just really bolsters the pain, the analgesic activity of the constituents, and also really focusing on regenerating some of those nerves. And I should also say that the Sweet Relief is made to be used locally to areas where there's pain, versus ideally the I Am Resilient is used more systemically, kind of neck to toe, or I personally do use it on my face, but if you have sensitive skin, just be careful with that. But I slather it all the way around, and so it's a heavier dose to get more of those systemic effects, whereas you don't need as much, at least locally, of the Sweet Relief to get the benefits, because we're focusing on more local areas where the nerves have been damaged or where there's pain.
Woo!
Got through it. Got through it.
Guys, Dr. J does not fuck around, okay?
No, these are the abbreviated, these are my Cliff Notes versions. So we will have bibliographies available at some point. I have hundreds of citations for all of this. So I'm not just
how it's
pulling it out.
possible, which I wonder every time I have a conversation with Dr. J. She has a photographic memory.
For better or worse, yes, it's true.
Which is also why she's able to pull from both ancient medicines as well as modern science in such an incredible way. Like you can see how intentionally every single ingredient is. I think like this is one of the things that like really just blew me away, right? Like how everything is selected functionally. Like even just like having a lotion, it's not like we were just gonna like buy some off the shelf lotion. Like you used all the things that also have health effects for you, right? You mentioned castor oil, we use jojoba, we use shea, all these things that also have health benefits for you, that also functionally work for softer skin, stuff like that. Like one of the things that I found incredible about how you put this formula together was the different ingredients that are functional, like cacao, we talked about that, how it has synergistic effects, and so does saffron. But then also just, and this is just a random small example, like helichrysum, which has all these benefits, but together create this incredible smell, which is also really important for people, right? So like all of this, plus the functionality on a cosmetic level, right? Plus from the experience of like smelling it is just an incredible experience. So lovely. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I wanted to mention that just to add to this, I know one of the things that's really important for us is the quality of the product that we're delivering to people, especially in an industry that is unregulated, where a lot of supplements that you can get are adulterated. They might not be exactly what they say. They might contain heavy metals. We really took a lot of time and a lot of care and spent a lot more than was the cheaper alternative to source these things from suppliers who are organic, who are testing for heavy metals, who are, have certifications that show that what they're selling is what it is. And that was something that was really important to us. So that I wanted to add to that. I know you mentioned, Dr. J is quickly going over everything, but when she shares this list of ingredients with other practitioners, they're like, oh my God, this is all in one thing, right? Like both like massage therapists who understand things from a functional medicine perspective, as well as actual naturopathic doctors and other doctors, right? Because when you go to naturopath, they will prescribe a lot of these things that you would have to take in 50 capsules. And so what's incredible is that all of those things are in this formula. And I think one of the things why people people say, how is it possible that it works like this? And the reason is because they're all like at the dosage that gives you that effect, which is what a lot of other companies don't do, right? They give you like a smaller dosage to be able to say the thing is in there, but then you're not feeling it. Obviously, it's more expensive for us to do that. But again, that's why it's working. And I think another really great sign is that when people see this, they're like, can I give this to my kid? People want to give it to their kids because it's a natural formula. So,
right. And I did want to say that too, that every single one of those constituents, when I made the formulation, was formulated so that it's a therapeutic dose. And that was a big thing. And I know that we went back and forth. Well, there's synergy. Maybe we can kind of skimp on certain things and it'll still work, but neither one of us was willing to skimp. We were like, if we're going to make this, we want it to work. And in order for it to work, I know the therapeutic dosages that we need to hit for it to work for each of these constituents. So that's, again, it explains the cost, but that's why it works. We didn't want to make something that was cheaper, but didn't work. It was just like any other crappy product on the market.
Yeah. I think another thing, and we know this because we've handled the ingredients. When we were making it, one thing that Dr. J said, which I think is important, is you want to eat it, right? Like you're using cacao nibs, like you're using like things that you would eat, like, and technically your skin is your biggest organ, right? Which is why it's able to absorb these things and go into your body. And it's so important for us to be putting things in our skin that we would be consuming in our mouth because we technically are consuming it anyways.
Exactly.
And then I think the last thing I want to say about this is just, we are using over 21 clinically effective ingredients in these formulas. Something like just using as a random example, magnesium. People take a magnesium pill and feel less anxiety.
Right.
There's a therapeutic dose of magnesium in this, plus
Yeah.
all of these other things that have all these other health properties that are so exciting and so good for you. So this is wonderful. Thanks, Dr. J.
Of course.